Welcome to the Behind the Glass podcast, sports podcast, I should say, because there's some frauds out there on YouTube that already took the name for their auto podcast, like they own it or something. No, I guess we're in.
Well,
so they came before us, so rightfully so, dibs, my good sirs. Thanks for joining us on this wintry, cold day. Stephen Priest Jr. here with you, Brandon Stowell on the other side. Here to talk some sports, recap what happened in the week of Denver sports. Obviously, we're a little bit behind, so we get to give a full reaction as everything sank in for us. But we're going to get to a lot of stuff today. Broncos, Nuggets, obviously, some national news. The big trade in the cricket world, we'll talk about that. No, I'm just kidding. The big trade in the NBA world, we'll get to that with Jimmy Butler. But all that and much more on today's episode of Behind the Glass. Where do you want to start? You want to start Nuggets? You want to start Broncos? You want to start the Jimmy Butler trade?
Let's you know what? Let's go with the Jimmy Butler trade since it just happened.
Jimmy Butler trade. All right. So for those who didn't know, Jimmy Butler was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers from the Minnesota Timberwolves for a second-round pick, Robert Covington and Dario Saric. I believe there was another player that went with Jimmy to Philadelphia, but I don't know his name.
I've never heard of him.
Yeah, just one of those throw-in pieces. So
yeah.
But yeah, overall, a huge trade in the NBA that shakes up everything. I'm really surprised that it took Minnesota this long to get rid of Jimmy Butler, but hey, you know what? They got rid of him. That distraction's gone. Now it's back to being Karl Anthony Towns' team. And look out, third stringers of the Philadelphia 76ers, because Jimmy's coming for your neck. Reaction to this, I was stunned, honestly. Huge trade. What do you think? Yeah,
you know what? It's I think this is the best spot possible for Jimmy Butler, to be honest. I think one thing that's concerning is what happened in Minnesota can easily happen in Philly with him and Embiid and Ben Simmons, maybe him getting on them a little bit too much, and that could cause some issues. Like it did in Minnesota. So that's one concern, but I think it's the best fit. They need someone like Jimmy Butler to kind of, at least offensively, have another shooter out there that can, or not just shooter, but scorer in general, because Ben Simmons, he can't shoot. He can kind of score, but not, I mean, it's mainly just getting to the rim, and you can stop that pretty easily. Embiid, Embiid's probably their best shooter, which is kind of sad. So
it's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's I think it's one of the best possible fits for Jimmy Butler. It's just the concern is hopefully Embiid and Simmons and the rest of the guys can handle the way Jimmy Butler carries himself with the team.
Yeah, and I like this move for the Sixers. Obviously, when you get any type of all-star added to your team, it's a huge boost for you. Right. But when I look at it in the big picture of things, I still don't think Philadelphia, I'm not going to say they don't have a chance, but I still would slot them maybe third or fourth in the Eastern Conference, which is kind of weird, probably for a lot of people. But when I look at that team, I don't really see anybody that's a threat from beyond three. Obviously, Embiid is great. Jimmy Butler's great. Defensively, they're probably going to be just a juggernaut. But when I look at the Celtics, who, I mean, when you have the starting lineup that they do, they're nuts. And they're hitting a little bit of a rough patch right now. I think they have enough talent to where they'll figure things out and they'll come out of that and they'll reestablish themselves. Obviously, Toronto's on a roll right now with Kawhi playing as great as he is. But I really think still that Boston is the team to beat in that conference. And then I'd probably go with Toronto there and Milwaukee. I don't know if you watched that Golden State game, and obviously Draymond didn't play, but anytime you can go into Oracle and not only beat the Warriors, but put a shellacking on them. I mean, Giannis and that whole team, they're long, they're athletic, they get after you defensively, and once they get out in transition, I mean, it's just over with. And they have some sneaky good shooters in Snell, and then Middleton obviously coming on as an underrated guy. I feel like he kind of emerged a few years back, but then kind of took a back seat a little bit, kind of faded away, but he's starting to reestablish himself as a scorer that we know that he's shown, at least in years past. But I don't know if I'm ready to vault up the Sixers just yet.
No, I agree. It's and for them, it's going to take time too. We're talking about Boston, who, they added Kyrie and Gordon Hayward essentially this year, and it's taking them a while to kind of just gel. And so when they do, though, they'll be the team to beat in the East. I would have Toronto ahead of Philly. I think Milwaukee is right there with Philly. Or Toronto will be number 2. So I have a Boston, Toronto, and then Philly and Milwaukee kind of there together. The one thing with Milwaukee is their 3-point shooting. They're one of the best 3-point shooting teams to see. They on average make the most threes per game at 15.1. The next team below them is Boston at 13.3. Houston, Charlotte really, and then Golden State. So Boston will always be that team in the East just because of the amount of talent that they have. And once Kyrie gets going, well, actually kind of is getting it going already. But once they kind of get Gordon Hayward back to being Gordon Hayward, they're probably going to be the team to beat. And then I would say Milwaukee and Philly are right there. The one thing with Milwaukee, though, is just I feel like they're on a hot run. I don't know how much I really believe in them, just because Giannis, as great as Giannis is, the shooting is just what bothers me. He can get to the rim whenever he wants, but if he runs into someone or a team that does a good job of not allowing him to get to the rim, I don't know if Milwaukee can be as great as they should. So that's just my only concern. If Giannis can shoot at a high percentage from 3 or even mid-range, then I think they're the most dangerous team. But until then, I'm just not going to buy into Milwaukee as much.
Yeah, and I mean, they've obviously been around the past few years. You've known that they've had talent. They've made some noise in the Eastern Conference playoffs, winning a series. I think last year they won one series, if I'm not mistaken. Or did they lose in the first round to Boston? I think they might have lost to Boston in the first round. Either way,
I can't remember.
You know that they have talent. And I completely understand. And the team that could possibly give them trouble, oddly enough, is a team like the Philadelphia 76ers. Mm-hmm. You have a guy like Embiid down low who's a rim protector, really good defensively. You have Ben Simmons, who's really long for a point guard. And then now you bring in Jimmy Butler. You mentioned it with Giannis. Obviously, he's an athletic freak. And I put this out on Twitter the other day. I mean, LeBron's the best athlete I've ever seen. Not best players and athlete. I'm kind of throwing that. I'm dividing the line there. I think LeBron's the best athlete I've ever seen. 6'8", a guy that's 275, can just run down the court like a Ferrari, but also can just bull you over like a Mack truck. But then you look at Giannis, and although he doesn't have the size of LeBron, he's way longer than LeBron. And I was looking at it the other night. I literally watched the Clippers game and the dunk that he had where he picked up the ball at the top of the key, just inside the three-point line, and he takes one step, and he's at the free throw line. 2 steps, he's midway into the paint, and then he dunks it. And I'm like, how is that even possible? This guy is obviously one of the greatest athletes we've ever seen. He's one of the greatest athletes in the game today. There's no one debating that. But I agree, his shooting isn't there yet. It's kind of like the LeBron thing. When he started out, you knew LeBron was a great athlete. He could get to the rim whenever he wanted, but teams would defend him by giving him that space, forcing him to shoot the jumpers. That's what I think teams are going to have to do to Giannis. And I think for him, I don't think he necessarily has to develop into a great shooter, but if he can develop, and I was talking about this the other day at work, if he can develop an effective jumper just to give the threat of having that jumper, if he can knock down the 18 to 20 footers consistently, or at least at a 45% clip, 42 to 45% clip, then, okay, teams can't necessarily just back off of you, and they have to come up or double at that point, and then that's when you get the open shots for other guys. But it's going to be interesting to see how Milwaukee plays out. I agree. We should kind of tamper expectations. Same with people who are doing it with the Nuggets. This is the first year that you're seeing this team really explode. Everybody knows these teams have talent, but can they sustain it? We're only 12 games in, so it'll be interesting to see if they can sustain it. Jimmy Butler to the Philadelphia 76ers. That's going to be something bearing to watch as we get through the NBA season. I want to get to this. I want to get this out of the way. The productive starting five. Okay, this is a thing that's been between us. Mainly, it started because you just hate Al Horford, and I just don't understand why.
He's productive.
Okay, that's disrespectful. He's an all-star. All right, let's productive
in the East.
Okay, I'll give you that, but he's still one of the better players in the league right now. Like, you're telling me if Al Horford could come play for the Nuggets, you wouldn't take Al Horford right now?
Well, he's better than Millsap.
Oh, exactly. So, and Millsap is one of those productive guys in that mold. But this is a thing that's been going on with us since the Met Radio days. All right, you love you some Gordon Hayward, who I think is just Mr. Productive. All right, he's good. Okay, he's solid. But does he really move the needle for me? No, not really. I don't necessarily believe in him like that. So we needed to do a starting five so we can get this out of the way. I'm going to be shocked if we have the same people, but I'm sure, I know at least for sure there's two guys that'll be on this list. Do you want to go first or you want me to go first?
You can go first because I'm still working on one.
Oh, of course you are. All right. So my starting productive five. All right. These are players we deem, they're good. They're solid players. Obviously, you'd want these players in any way.
They're not stars.
No, not stars, but
they're on the
good
edge.
Players. You're not necessarily game planning for them, but you know that, if you don't pay attention to them, they could, potentially hurt you badly. At point guard, I'm going to go with Jeff Teague. Jeff Teague had that one breakout year in Atlanta. I think it was his last season in Atlanta where he was super good, super talented, averaging probably 20 plus at the time. And then after that, he just kind of went back into Jeff Teague mode and just kind of, he's good, but he's not great. I need to pull up the stats for these guys so I can really hammer home my point. Let's see. Jeff Teague, who's he with? Minnesota now? Let's see. Minnesota stats. Okay. Okay. Jeff Teague, right now, he's averaging 7 assists. Not bad. 30 minutes a game. Not bad. 13 points. Okay, so Jeff Teague is a 13.7 rebound, 3 rebound, and 7 assist guy. That's pretty productive, I would say. Let's switch back and forth. That way I can pull up all the stats for my guys. Who do you have at point guard? Do you have a point guard yet?
I do.
Okay. Who do you have at your point guard position?
My point guard is Ricky Rubio.
Interesting. I wanted to go Ricky. I thought about putting him on the list. He's definitely one of those guys.
Yeah, I've always thought that Ricky Rubio was, when he was drafted by Minnesota. Remember that draft class? Minnesota drafted Ty Lawson, Ricky Rubio, and Johnny Flynn.
Johnny Flynn, yes.
Yeah, that was
But
yikes.
It's not so much that they took those guys. Who did they pass up? Steph Curry. Oh man, what do you know?
Right. But okay, so for Ricky Rubio, last year it was kind of his, I don't want to say breakout year, but I mean with Utah and how good Utah was last year, he averaged 13 a game, 5 assists, 4.6 rebounds. He's always been a great passer. His last year in Minnesota, 11 points and 9 assists, 10 points, 8.6 assists. Ricky Rubio was one of those guys. He was supposed to be the next Steve Nash type of guy, at least when it coming into the draft when he was drafted by Minnesota. He was supposed to be that kind of guy. Never got there, but at the same time, when your career average of assists is 8 assists per game for a career, it's pretty good. He's just kind of that guy offensively, and you can kind of see it with Utah. He's important to that team. He's that guy that does a little bit of everything. Right now, 11 points a game, 8 assists, 3 rebounds, 1.4 steals. So he shoots, 89% from the free throw line. He's not a great shooter. He's only shooting 28% from 3 this year, but he shot 35% from 3 last year, 42% from the field last year. So he's kind of that guy who does a little bit of everything, and he's good at just being that kind of mediator for Utah. So
that's
my point guard.
Yeah, I thought about putting Ricky on there. But he's definitely one of those guys where I think if he could be your second unit guy, then you probably have a really damn good team, or at least a really damn good starting point guard. Because I mean, Ricky Rubio, he's become into a solid player, as you mentioned, was billed as this great gifted passer, and just never could really shoot. He's gotten better at that over the years, but still not to where I'm sure people thought he might have been. So a good duo there. Teague, Rubio. I don't think you can go wrong with those guys. It pains me to say who my 2 is, because I really didn't want to put him in this list, but at the same time, he's only, I think, 23 years old. I'm going to go with Gary Harris at my number 2. You look at Gary's numbers. In 33 minutes, he's averaging 17 points right now, 4 rebounds a game, 3 assists, and then you see where's the steals at? Just a little bit. Oh, so 1 steal a game. So Gary right now, he's that two-way player that's not necessarily a star, but that there's potential for him to, at the lowest, be Aaron Aflalo-esque, and maybe at the highest be a poor man's, I don't know, just one of those two-way guys. I mean, if you want to throw like the Paul George, Jimmy Butler, maybe not a poor man's version. You know how there's like great value? Whatever the great value is to the great value, the knockoff to the knockoff version, that's maybe what Gary could be. Maybe a little bit better than that. Maybe he could be a great value type of guy one day. But I think Gary right now, you look at his stats, and as I mentioned, 17 points a game, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, all in 33 minutes. I think he's one of those guys that you have to worry about, that that he can knock down the big shots, but at the same time, he's not at that star level just yet. But I think Nuggets fans should be encouraged because he's only 23 years old.
24.
24, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Gary and I are twins. I have the same person. Gary Harris to me is that guy who he does literally everything for the Nuggets. He can score, he can pass the ball, he can rebound, he plays great defense, and he is the most consistent player on that team. He actually had his first bad game of the year against Brooklyn, where he shot like 1 for 11. That never happens. I think that might have happened maybe once or twice all last season. He's that guy who's going to come in and do what you need him to do every single game, for the most part, except for, that one or two games throughout the season. And, like I said, he had that game against Brooklyn, but he's also going to have some of those games where he goes off for 30, or he's going to hit a game winner, 3 against Oklahoma City. He can do just about anything that you throw out at him. But like you said, and I think on this list, I think we both have guys that they're not there yet, but they can become stars in this league. And he's kind of on that bubble where he's only 24 and he has a chance. He's not even in his prime yet. He has a chance to kind of become a star. And so for Denver fans, that's what you got to look forward to. But he's Mr. Productive, at least at the 2 guard.
Yeah. And there's a lot of guys out there. I was going to go with Avery Bradley, but point total is not necessarily there. And you talk about a guy who had lots of potential in Boston, and then he gets traded and he's kind of fallen off of the map there. Speaking of Boston, at the 3 position, at Gordon Hayward, all productive guy. I mean, 13 points per game. One block a game, almost a block a game, close to a half steal a game. So, I mean, not terrible. But at the same time, I mean, you look at Gordon Hayward's numbers, 25 minutes, 10 points per game. And I get it, he's coming off of an injury-plagued season. Maybe in Utah, he was probably like a maybe 18 to 20 point per night type of guy. 5 rebounds a game right now, 3 assists. I'm sure that number will bump up from 10, and it may not because, I mean, you look at their options there, Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. He might be the 4th option, the 3rd or 4th option there. So who knows if that'll bump up. But I think he's good. He's probably sneakily good offensively, but I mean, he's just one of those guys he's not a max player. He's probably at the point to where what he is. I don't know if he's going to get much better than what he is right now, but he's a solid, productive guy in the league. And I think you have to have him at your 3. If he can be all these guys, if these guys are coming off the bench for you, these are solid benches that you have. But as a starter, luckily he's on a team that has 3 other guys that can carry the load for them.
Yeah, well, with Gordon Hayward too, I agree now just because of the team he's on. There's just so much other guys on that team that can do what he does. And they're all kind of, him, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, they're all kind of the same player. So it's kind of hard for anyone on that team to stand out other than Kyrie. So that's where it's kind of hard for Gordon Hayward and kind of hard to judge what kind of player he could actually be on, say, if he were to stay with Utah, or some other team. So that one, I thought about putting Gordon Hayward on here. I did just because of the position he's at in Boston, but I actually decided to put Chris Middleton here at small forward. Now,
interesting.
Let's see, this season he's averaging 18.8 points per game, 5 rebounds, 4.3 assists. He's another guy like Gary where he's a two-way guy, just at the small forward position. He's 6'8". Let's see, he's averaging so far this season, I believe he's averaging about a steal and a half. Yeah, 1.4 steals per game. He's a good defender. He shoots the ball. He's shooting the ball really well from 3 this year, but that'll probably go down a little bit. But he's in his 7th year. Seventh season. He was drafted by Detroit. But again, he's just been kind of that guy that he can do a little bit of everything. And for Milwaukee, he's that perfect guy next to Giannis. So that's who I have at 3.
I can't fault you there. I'm kind of disappointed that you didn't put your guy there, but that's fine. That's beside the point. At 4, I have Derek Favors. Speaking of a guy who was formerly in Utah, a guy who's currently in Utah.
It seems like Utah likes those productive guys.
Oh, they love the productive guys. They're a productive team, if you ask me. No, Derek Favors. I mean, this was a guy coming out of, I believe it was Georgia Tech that he went to school at. Was one of the highly touted players. I think he was rumored, the Nuggets maybe want a guy like this. You remember early on in the Melo trade talks, when he was with Brooklyn, I believe, or was it New Jersey at the time? They were thinking about including Derek Favors in that deal for the Nuggets as an up-and-coming player, someone who showed a lot of promise. You look at his stats right now through 11 games, 22 minutes, 11.4 points per game, 7 rebounds. Not an assist guy, obviously. Almost has a steal a game average, so that's not terrible there. But I mean, another productive guy, a guy who has some moves down in the post that he can really work on you with. Decent defensively, really good complement to Rudy Gobert and what they do, because obviously Rudy Gobert can't score outside of 4 feet. And at least with Derek Favors, he can stretch the floor a little bit for you, maybe from elbow in. I'm not sure what his range is outside of that. But another guy who very solid starter in the NBA right now.
Yeah, that's a good one. Mine, actually, I have 2 Nuggets on this list.
Oh, boy.
At 4, I got Paul Millsap.
Ah, yes. Yep.
And another former Utah. I think most of our players have played for Utah or is playing for Utah.
This is a theme here.
But a guy who throughout his career has always been around that, 13 to 18 points per game guy, 6 to 8 rebounds per game, 2 to 3 assists per game. He's, actually a decent passer for a power forward, and is a great defender. He is pretty much the definition of a productive power forward that you have in the league. He was never going to be a 20 point per guy, points per game guy, 10 rebounds. So he was never going to be that guy. But what he is he gives you what you need. And for the Nuggets, he's giving them exactly what they need. He can shoot from the outside a little bit. He can score in the post, but he's also a great defender. He's kind of their anchor defensively, and that's what he did for Atlanta. That's what he did for Utah. That's what he's doing for Denver. So does that warrant a $30 million contract? No, it doesn't. But that's what you got to pay if you're a team like Denver. So he's that guy, though. Last year, he averaged 14.6 points per game, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.2 blocks, 1 steal a game. This season, just under 12 points per game, 7.4 rebounds, a couple assists, a steal, and a block. He is that guy, and he'll always be kind of that guy. So that's who I have for power forward.
I know you conveniently left off Gordon Hayward, so I'm sure you probably didn't leave off my guy from the list. I'll play by the rules and put him on there. I have Al Horford. At this point in his career, was never a star, but it was always a huge factor in Atlanta when he was down there. Now he comes to a great Boston team where he doesn't necessarily have to be one of the faces, but a guy who is really just underrated and just does the dirty work. I mean, without him, that team probably isn't as good as they should be. He's just one of those engine guys, one of those glue guys who just does it all for you, kind of like Marcus Smart does for them in a way as well. But Al Horford, 12 games this year, 30 minutes, 12 points per game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. I mean, the guy does it all for you. You talk about Gary Harris doing it all. I mean, this guy defends. He can stretch the floor. He's so steady out there. It never looks like he's playing rushed or he feels pressured. He's just so steady. He's a guy you do have to account for. You probably don't necessarily game plan for Al Horford, but I think if you really don't keep an eye on this guy, he can easily drop maybe like 25 on you and like 10 rebounds because he has that sort of skill set. Al Horford, not an overly athletic guy by any means, but a guy who's just going to outwork you, be smarter than you, and he's just a perfect fit and a contrast to what they already have in Boston.
Yeah, he is a taller version of Paul Millsap. Or Paul Millsap is a shorter version of Al Horford. They're essentially the same player. They just one plays power forward, one plays center. The reason why I have Al Horford at center too, for all the same reasons that you said. The reason why I left out Gordon Hayward is because, to me, Gordon Hayward hasn't even been productive this year. So
he's downgraded. Look at that.
He's been downgraded, right. But I think part of that is the team he's on. Also coming back from injury. I just don't think we've seen what Gordon Hayward is. I don't think even Gordon Hayward knows what role he's playing in Boston. I don't think Brad Stevens knows what to do with Gordon Hayward. I think he's just, because you have so many young guys on that team that can do what Gordon Hayward does and maybe even a little bit better, that honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they traded Gordon Hayward by the deadline. He doesn't seem to fit in Boston right now. And until that is figured out, I'm not going to put anything on Gordon Hayward. He's either, and honestly, that injury could have pretty much ended kind of what he was going to be or what he was. He might not ever get back to that level. So that's why I didn't put him on that list, because there's, in my opinion, Chris Middleton is a more productive guy that's not a star yet.
It's kind of like a situation. It's funny that you mentioned Brad Stevens and maybe, the role being a little bit murky for him in Boston for Gordon Hayward. It's kind of weird to think about, but it's almost that less is more theory. I get people want to have, as many stars as you can. But just because you throw stars together, on paper it looks great. But just because you do it doesn't mean it's going to work out. With Golden State, you have 3 guys who all can score, and a 4th guy who doesn't. That's not his best skill set, scoring, in Draymond Green. He can do everything else. That's why it's perfect for them. They have enough somehow, some way, and even Clay has to sacrifice to being maybe like a 15 to 20 point per game guy. Whereas if it was just him and Steph again, he's probably a 23 to 27 point per game guy, right? Just off of what he can do. So you look at with Boston, you have Kyrie Irving, you have Jason Tatum. Those are the main 2 guys that you have to focus on as your best scorers and your best really isolation guys. And then you have Jaylen Brown, who really just made a tremendous jump, in my opinion, from year 1 to year 2. Now I think year 3 he's in, to where he couldn't really shoot his first year, but now you really have to pay attention to this guy not just mid-range, but three-point line on. Like, this guy, not only is he super athletic, he can break you down and get to the rim whenever and dunk on you, but now he can probably knock down the three-point ball at maybe a 37 to 40% clip, which is something you have to account for. And then with Gordon Hayward being the third guy, now it's like, does he do anything super special? No. Is he a great isolation guy? No. Can he get to the rim at will? Not really. But, I mean, he's still a solid all-around player. So I wonder if maybe the best option for Boston is to, somehow, some way get value for him and really allow more opportunities and touches for the three guys that need it the most. I don't know. It's a weird situation. But speaking of Boston, let's get to, obviously, we're, a week past that game was on last Sunday, I think it was. The Nuggets.
Monday?
Yeah, it was like Sunday or Monday. But the Nuggets get a huge win over the Boston Celtics. Right now it's looking kind of weird because Boston's not necessarily where they were last year, but still, a win's a win over a healthy squad like that. The big storyline, though, was Jamal Murray and his shot after the game. As time's dwindling down, the Nuggets have the game in hand. He's going off for 48. He wants to get 50. Kyrie made a big deal about it. Really, the whole Boston team made a big deal about it. What was your take on Murray's last second shot for 50 when the game was already in the bag?
I'll say this. When he was dribbling that ball, I was telling Bert, don't shoot it. Don't shoot it. Don't do it. And he did it. What he should have done, if he wanted to take the shot, I get it. The crowd is telling him shoot it. I'm sure the whole entire stadium was telling him to shoot it, and that's all he's hearing. He knows, and he wanted to take it. But if you're gonna do it from the get-go, take that ball and lay it up. Because at that point, Boston probably would have tried to stop you. And, it's not the problem is he kind of just dribbled, looked like he was just going to, dribble out the clock. And then he shot it. Grab that ball and from the get go, make a move to the basket because all you need is two and go for a layup or a dunk or something. Because at least that gives Boston a chance to stop you. And it's right away. It's not like you're teasing the crowd, you're teasing Boston type of thing. So I'm fine with doing that. I'm fine with going for 50. Just, you should have done it right away. Now, I don't fault, Jamal is 21. He's going to do that. For Boston to be as salty as they were, I think it was a little over-exaggerated. I get it. I get why they were upset. But you know what? I remember when Melo was pretty young, and he went off against Washington. And he had, I believe, 47, 48. And you know what Washington did? They had literally three guys hugging Melo, just surrounding Melo. They didn't let him touch the ball. They didn't let him get 50. So if Boston didn't want Jamal to get 50, one, you shouldn't have let him get 48. But don't let him touch that ball, because he's 21 years old. He's going to take that shot, whether it's right away or the last second. So don't let him get the ball. Surround him. If you surround him and don't let him touch that ball goes to Gary, that ball goes to Jokic. They're not going to try and get it to Jamal because they're just not like that. They don't have that mindset. So it wouldn't have been an issue. Just don't let him get the ball. So as much as Jamal shouldn't really have taken that shot in particular, it's also on Boston for letting him take the shot.
It's kind of like what Cam Newton said before Super Bowl 50. If you don't want me celebrating in the end zone, then don't let me get in the end zone. And we all know how that turned out. Listen, Jamal has had these, last season he had the whole thing with Lonzo Ball dribbling around him and all that type of stuff. This is just another Jamal thing. And listen, I'm on the side of no, he shouldn't have shot the shot. Okay, it's one of those unwritten rules of sports that the game's in hand. I get it. You're blazing hot right now. But if you'll remember, previously before that, maybe 20 seconds before that, Jamal actually had a layup and he missed it.
He got fouled.
Well, no, there was one where he missed the layup. It was a reverse layup and he missed it. But they were trying to get it to him when Boston was fouling, but the Nuggets just couldn't get it to him. And he kind of hesitated. You could tell he got the ball. He was dribbling out the clock, and he's like, you could tell he wanted to shoot it, but he's like,
Right.
I know I shouldn't. And then it was like 2, 1, and he was like, screw it. Let this thing go. It was like one of those angels and devil on your shoulder on the situation.
Right, right.
That's what it was like. One side's like, Jamal, don't do it. And the other was like, hell yeah, just freaking chuck it up. And Jamal's like, yeah, I'm going for it. Screw it. And he missed it. And I get it. Kyrie was angry. The whole team was angry. Yeah, it was petty. But I think they were more angry that they lost. And that's just adding, salt to an open wound already. Should he have done it? No. Was it blown out of proportion a little bit? Yes. And Kyrie, chill out, okay? You're the guy that faked an injury so you could leave Cleveland and get traded. So let's chill out with who's petty and who's not, all right? Let's calm down with that talk. But Jamal, hopefully in the future, and the vets talk to him. Coach Malone talked to him, I'm sure. Even the ref, I think, gave him some words of advice. It was funny on the Altitude broadcast. You could see kind of like the ref giving him a stink eye, like, what are you doing? But I think he'll learn from that, and going forward, you won't see that from Jamal Murray. Hopefully we do see him scoring 48 much more often, though. But the good thing, he's 21 years old. Speaking of a guy...
And one thing real quick, and I said this on Twitter right after, he's 21. He's... Yeah. You don't know how many more chances. Now, I do think Jamal's going to have another chance of getting 50 because he's that talented, but you don't know when that's going to happen. And it's a special thing. And I tweeted this. It's funny. He went for 48 that night. And I tweeted after the game, I was like, he's 21 years old. Jamal Murray's probably going to put up 12 points in the next game, because that's what 21-year-olds do. They take those shots. And then the next game, they kind of fall flat on their face because that's what 21-year-olds do. They're inconsistent. They're boneheaded. What were you doing at 21 type of thing. And I don't know what he did in the game after, but I'm pretty sure he was pretty close to 12 points. He had like 14 or 16 points.
Yeah, that Memphis game, he struggled right out of the gate. And I think he closed strong, but it was a struggle out of the gate. Jamal Murray at 21 is getting 48 points. Stephen Priest at 21 was trying to figure out how to get 48 items of food or something ingested in him. So that's the difference there. Speaking of a guy who really was struggling scoring on the opposite end, Nikola Jokic, until obviously that huge game against the Nets, which I don't want to talk about it. It was a rough game. Shouldn't have been that close in the first place. And maybe we can just dissect that a little bit. But Nikola Jokic first, obviously had a stretch where he didn't even score. I think it was 4 games without scoring more than 10 points. And then he had a stretch like that last year where it was like 3 or 4 games where he just wasn't scoring the basketball. He was ratcheting up assists and rebounds, but for whatever reason, he gets in these lulls. And, I tweeted it after the Memphis game. And I was just like, there's just something wrong with Jokic. I don't know if it was an injury, and there was like rumors swirling of maybe an injured hand or finger or whatever the case was. To me, I think it was... not necessarily, and some people were attacking him like he's not a want-it guy. He doesn't go out and play with... I don't think that's it. I think Nikola Jokic wants to win. He wants to dominate. But I think for him, I think it's a combination of things. I think defensively this year, he's been better than I've ever seen. He's not necessarily a stopper by any means, but you can tell he's expending much more effort and much more energy on the defensive side. And I really think that's one of the leading causes as to why he looks kind of just sluggish on the offensive end. I don't necessarily think he's hurt, and maybe he is. I don't know. But it sure didn't look like that against Brooklyn. And I think it was also a case of just, his teammates were getting hot. You had Murray getting hot. Gary Harris had a great game before that Celtics game. And guys were, Juancho's contributing. I just think in some ways, Nikola Jokic kind of fell out of the offense in a way, which is kind of crazy to think of. But with so many weapons that the Nuggets have, I just think at times, he's a passive guy, so he can become passive and wants to continue to feed his teammates. But for Nikola, he has to be aggressive. When you're going to get paid like the max guy and you're going to get that contract, the richest contract in Denver sports history, you have to take that on your shoulders and realize that you're the guy. Even if you're a pass-first guy, he's got to realize he can't go up and put up 4-game stretches of 8 points, 9 points, and not have an impact in games like that. It's just unacceptable.
Yeah, I get the criticism. I I'll say this. Jokic, and I think there's a difference between how international players and their mindset is versus how the mindset is with fans in the US in the NBA. Because you think about the NBA, it's star driven, it's player driven. Overseas, it's not. It's about the team. You play your role, and that's it. Money doesn't really affect anything. It doesn't matter if you're the highest paid player. You do what you are supposed to do in the offense, and that's it. In the NBA, it's you make all this money, you should be averaging 30 points a game type of thing. And I think Jokic is kind of learning that. I get the criticism with, he's making a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. I also think you got to remember that the money doesn't matter to Nikola. And well, then you say, well, why did he take it? Well, if you're going to offer it, he's not stupid. He's going to take it. But it doesn't, the money doesn't mean to him what it means to everyone else. And I think that's the hard thing about this. And it's funny because all the people that are covering the Nuggets and who have covered the Nuggets the last couple of years understand this, understand where Jokic is coming from, understand why Jokic is like this, like myself, like a couple others. But then you look at, I call them Broncos media, or the national. You can say the national media, where all the focus is on. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to say this. I have to say this. All the Broncos media, well, they're all, for the most part, all of Denver media, they're focused on the Broncos. Yeah. Deservedly so. The Broncos have been that team in Denver for forever. But all of a sudden, the Broncos start to struggle, and look, the Nuggets, they're 9-1. Look at that. They're kind of filling that winning void. We're gonna start paying attention to them. Oh, look at Jokic. He's he just put up 22, 12, and 9 against Chicago. Look at that. And all of a sudden they lose. And they lose to Memphis, which I don't think Memphis is a good team. First off, they're not a bad team. They had a bad year last year because of injuries. They're a good team. And in Memphis, they've always been that's always been a tough place to play. So they lose, and all of a sudden, all hell breaks out. And it's like, it's all, who played bad in that game because they lost. And it was, Jokic only had 4 points. And he had 6 turnovers. But was anyone all up in arms about that against Boston when Jamal went for 48? Was anyone saying anything when they beat Utah by almost 20 points? Did they say anything when they beat Cleveland by 19? No. Did they say anything against New Orleans when Jokic only had 12 points and shot the ball only 8 times? No. Did they really say anything last year when Jokic kind of had that same kind of 4 or 5 game stretch where he didn't really do much offensively? No. So it's the money, and it's the quote unquote Denver media, or Broncos media, where it's like, the Broncos are struggling. This team is 9-1. Let's pay attention to them. Look at that. This guy, Nikola Jokic, is making $150 million over 5 years. He's supposed to be the guy that is, averaging, he's our star. He's supposed to be putting up, 25 to 30 a game. That's not who Jokic is. I get it. He's making a lot of money. In the eyes of NBA fans and media, he's supposed to be averaging 25 to 30 a game, but that's not who Jokic is. And Jokic isn't going to change because of money. He's not going to change because he's the face of a franchise. And that's a good thing. That's a bad thing. And you're going to have to take that. And Denver fans are going to have to realize that that's who he is. But I'll say this. This is why you can't build a team around Jokic. This is why Jokic can't be the best player on this team. He can, people can say what they want and the money that he's making. But to me, Jokic isn't the most important player on this team. He scored 4 points, 7 points, 8 points, and they beat at Cleveland, Utah, and Boston. And he scored 4, 7, and 8. So, and they lost by 2 points against Memphis, at Memphis, against a tough team, and he only scored 4. And they lost to Brooklyn at home by 2, and he put up 37. He's not the most important player on this team. The most important player on this team is Gary Harris. Gary Harris went 1 for 11 last night, or 2 nights ago, and they lost against Brooklyn. I put that loss on Gary as much as anyone put the loss against Memphis on Nikola Jokic. Gary Harris is the most important player on that team, and he's their rock. Jokic has always been inconsistent, and it's not because of just he's not scoring or whatever. It's just his mindset. It's not that mindset that you see most NBA stars have, which is fine. But and you've known me for I don't know how long, but I've always said this. You shouldn't build your team around a center or a big in general. It doesn't work in today's NBA. You need someone who is a wing guy, maybe even a point guard, who can score it from anywhere, who can shoot the ball, and who can create their own shot in the late game. And to me, that guy on Nuggets is Jamal Murray. I think eventually Jamal Murray will be that guy for Denver and will be the best player on this Nuggets team. But right now, Jokic has the money, and that's where Denver media and that's where national media is going to point fingers at, and it sucks for Nikola. And I'm kind of concerned because I'm not sure how he's going to handle that. Now, obviously, against the Nets, he put up 37, 21, but they still lost. So it's just I hate to say that with the media and stuff like that, but it's just you got to understand the player, and you got to understand who he is and how he is, and that's just not who Jokic is. And you're gonna have to look elsewhere if you want a guy who has that mindset. And that guy is Murray, but he's 21. You're gonna have to be patient on that. So and Jokic is only 23, so you're gonna have to be patient on Jokic too. So again, it's a patience thing. This team is ahead of schedule. Even at 9-3, they're ahead of schedule, and they're not gonna be winning championships anytime soon. They're not gonna be getting to the Western Conference Finals anytime soon. You're gonna have to be patient. I get he's making a lot of money, but he's 23. He's 23. He's gonna be inconsistent. You have to know who he is.
And that's really the crazy part about all of this. And I thought you dropped a lot of good points there. All these guys. You look at Gary. Nikola, and then you look at Jamal, and if you want to throw Michael Porter in there too as well, none of these guys are even like in their prime years yet.
The Nuggets are the second youngest team in the NBA.
Right. I mean, you consider maybe like the prime, like 25 to like 30, 31, like the prime years of guys like that. And none of these guys are even touching that right now. But to get to everything you said, because there was a lot there, and I think a lot of it was really correct in my opinion. I think for Nikola being dubbed as the guy, I think it's a two-way street. Okay, I think that Denver media, rightfully so, which is predominantly Broncos centric. Trust me, I know I work for the biggest Broncos centric radio station in Denver. Ratings show that, so suck it, everyone else. But at the same time, I think it's a two-way street. Okay, when the Broncos aren't good, But, when the Broncos are good, but you're hearing about, or at least they're competitive or something, you're hearing, oh, Nikola Jokic on the Nuggets, Nikola Jokic, like this guy, he's a guy. He's one of the best guys. Like Nuggets fans, Nuggets media, they're pushing and they're whispering like, hey, you got to come see this guy, Nikola. So then when the rest of the people and the fans, they turn their attention, they're like, okay, let's see what this guy has. Oh, wow, he did have a good game here. So then they get it in their mind. Okay, well, I'm being told that this guy is a stud. I'm being told he's a star, but then when I see him come out and pull a stretch of 4, 9, 8, whatever the case is, okay, well, he's not looking like the star, but then he got paid like he's the star, so then he should perform better. And I think it's a two-way street. I think, Nuggets fans and media are really pushing the narrative that Jokic is a star, which I think he has the potential to be. He's not going to be a superstar, and it's really petty and picky. I get it, but I think in the NBA you should divvy up. There's superstars, which there's like 2 or 3, and then there's stars, elite guys. Okay, LeBron, Kevin Durant, and you can even throw Steph Curry in there. They're on a different planet. They're on a different level right now. Those are guys that can just completely ruin series for you, can change franchises for you. Those are those guys. You have the second tier guys, which is like the Kawhi Leonard, the Russell Westbrook, the James Harden guys, who are still stars in their own right, damn good players, but they're not to the level of those other 3. Can Nikola be on the bottom end of those stars lists? For sure he can. But I think at the same time, it's a two-way street of a narrative being pushed, but at the same time, when you want that narrative being pushed of, okay, this guy is a star, when it gets turned on to him and people are starting to shine the spotlight, okay, now he's got to produce, which I get it. Having watched Nikola since he's been on the team, he's not that guy. And I think we got too enamored for good and bad reasons with the Mamba mentality. NBA fans love the Mamba mentality. Every NBA player has to have the killer instinct, Kobe Bryant. Okay, that's fine. You can have that killer instinct, but that's always not efficient, and that's not always the right basketball play, and that's not always the smart thing to do. Okay, the Mamba mentality, while yes, it was clutch at times, not all the time, it's not always the best thing to do. Nikola Jokic is a hugely smart, heavy, just a great IQ basketball player. He's going to make the right plays. And I think that's why I said it's not so much that I don't think he's shying away from the shots, is that I think he was in that stretch. Everybody else was getting hot. Everybody else was playing really well. And I think he just became too passive. It's kind of like what LeBron can do at times. And I'm not comparing Jokic to LeBron and saying that they're the same, but you see this with LeBron, where he can become passive, he can want to get his teammates involved too much, to an extreme, and then it hurts the overall team. And I completely agree with you. Nikola Jokic, for as much as I love the guy, that's my star, I love the guy to death, he cannot be your best player. If he's your best player, you can't go far. Just like the Philadelphia 76ers, if Joel Embiid is your best player, you're not going to win a championship.
And it's not a knock on those guys.
No, it's not, but it's just the way the game has evolved. The game has evolved into a more small, fast-paced, a more spread out type of game. And if you have these centers who play predominantly in the post but can do other things like Embiid and Jokic can do, they can shoot, they can pass. In some aspects, one is a better defender than the other, but Jokic shows that he can, if with effort, he can defend. They can't be your best player, because if they are, then when it comes playoff times, they just can't hang. It's just the way the game has evolved. So I agree completely. Jokic cannot be the best player. At the same time, though, I don't think the Nuggets have that guy yet, which is crazy to say, because a lot of people say, Jamal Murray, you say Gary Harris, all these guys should be studs. But I think for the Nuggets, if everything goes to plan and if everything is perfect, Michael Porter Jr. has to be the best player, because if he's not the best player, then the Nuggets won't win a championship. If he is the best player and all these guys can reach at least a semblance of the potential we think they can, then they could be in contention for a long time. It's crazy, I know, but that's just how the league is. Unless you have a point guard that's Steph Curry, he probably shouldn't be your best player, a la Oklahoma
Damian
City.
Lillard.
Portland, great one as well. These guys can't be your best player. It's really funny how it has to be this wing guy, Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, it has to be the Giannis Antetokounmpo. It has to be these guys for whatever reason. I don't know why, but you look at the history, these teams are the teams that are dominating right now. Obviously, there's more stars teaming up and all that, but at the end of the day, to wrap it up, Jokic can't be the best player. And that's really crazy to think about, but he just can't.
Well, look at 2 nights ago against Brooklyn. He was the best player. They lost.
Yeah. Right. And I think this is more so too. A lot of people are getting on, well, Nikola Jokic, he's struggling. You look at these past 2 games for the Nuggets. Okay, against Memphis, nobody showed up in that game. Paul Millsap, 1 for 7, 2 points. Torrey Craig, 2 for 5, 5 points, which they should also think about making a move for him to go to the bench because Juancho's been playing great in his minutes. Jokic, obviously 0 for 1, 4 points. Can't happen. Jamal Murray, 6 for 21, 15 points.
He tried.
Harris, I mean, he's at least chucking it up. Gary Harris
but
was
that's
6
Jamal.
of 16.
He's going to do that.
Exactly. And Harris is 6 of 16 for 20 points in that game. And then you look at the Nets game, Jokic is going out of his mind. He's going crazy. Okay, you're getting a little bit better, but the 2 guys that you really need to step up, Gary Harris, 1 of 11, 4 points. Jamal Murray, 5 of 14, 16 points, but it's just not good enough.
Yeah. I'll say this about Jamal and your point with Michael Porter. Because I did say Jamal, whenever I talk about, I always forget about Michael Porter, and that's how lucky the Nuggets got.
Yeah.
Because if Michael Porter ends up being what I think he's going to be, he was supposed to be a top 2, probably the top pick in that draft with. I
think it was the Bagley draft, the Marvin Bagley. No,
because if the rules, yes, if he didn't get hurt, he would have been probably the top pick over DeAndre Ayton. But if the rules were they could come out of high school, he would have been the first pick in the year before over Lonzo Ball, Markelle Fultz, Jason Tatum. He would have been the number 1 pick in that draft. That's how good Michael Porter is. You got to hope that he gets healthy and he can stay healthy because he's a special guy. With Jamal, I see that too. I get it. He's a point guard, but Jamal isn't just. See, Jamal is a weird because Jamal is 6'5". He's not a point guard. He's a combo guard. He can play at the 2. I'll say this: if they didn't have Gary Harris, or if Gary Harris was 6'6" instead of 6'4", then Jamal would be at the 2. Gary would be at the 3. And honestly, I think that's something that maybe they should look at is maybe starting Monte Morris at point, having Jamal start at the 2 and Gary at the 3. But the problem is that Gary's so undersized. That's the thing with, I could see, say Michael Porter ends up being a solid player, not that guy
like Rudy Gay
that you said. Jamal can be, because the difference is that mindset. The difference is it's not the same mindset it's kind of like, it's the same mindset as Russell, but the difference with Jamal and Russ is that Jamal can shoot. And Jamal is a special shooter. Jamal can be, not Steph Curry, but he can be one of those type of guys where, and I know that, I've said this before, and I ended up being wrong. Well, Steph Curry ended up proving me wrong that you can't build. I've always been one of those that said you can't build a team around the center. You can't win a championship with your center being the best player. You can't win a championship with your point guard being the best player. Steph changed that. And if Jamal and who's Jamal's favorite player? Steph Curry. If he can be, I'm not saying he's going to be Steph Curry, because Steph is a once in a lifetime type player that we will never see again. But Jamal is a great shooter and he can create his shot. And the way if you watch Jamal, you can see his game is a lot like Steph's. And if he has that mindset, which he does, he has that kind of Mamba mentality that you said, he kind of has that. If he develops, and he's only 21, so by the time he gets into his prime in 3-4 years, if he's at that level, they can win with him being the best player, because of what Steph has done. Jamal can do that. Now he's not going to make 400 threes in a season, but he can be that type of player, and that's why Jamal just wait. Just be patient on Jamal. And I know a lot of people aren't very patient, especially here in Denver, especially with the Denver fans. But Jamal's going to be that guy. And if Jamal ends up being that guy and Michael Porter is also that guy, they're going to win not just one championship, but they're going to win 2 or 3.
Right. And with back issues, that's the part that really concerns me.
That's the scary
about
part,
Michael Porter, because once you have a back issue, those tend to not go away. So I don't know if he can be what we all hope. I hope he can. Obviously, everybody hopes he can, especially Tim Connolly and Kroenke and all those guys. But if he can pan out, that would be amazing. The bright outlook I think people should carry away with the Nuggets is, yes, they're 9-3. I think ahead of schedule, the way you put it is perfect. They don't have Michael Porter. Will Barton's hurt, who they really miss right now, by the way. And
Yes.
You look at Isaiah Thomas, he's not even playing yet.
Yeah.
He's not even playing.
Well, I want to get to these guys, actually. This is a good segue to these guys because this is going to change a whole lot when they get back.
Yeah.
And actually, going back to that Boston game, when Isaiah Thomas signed with Denver, I immediately said no. Because this is another Will Barton situation where they like to play hero ball. I love Will Barton. I do. I know it sounds like I absolutely hate the dude.
Whoa.
No, hold on. I do. I do love what Will does for this team. The only thing that drives me insane about Will Barton is a hero ball.
Right.
And my problem with Will is that he, in my opinion, and part of it's Malone's fault too, is that I felt like he hindered Jamal's and Gary's development. And that's what drove me nuts, because in my mind, Will Barton is not going to be here. You know, he's not the future. Jamal and Gary are, and Nikola Jokic is. And so I want them to take those reins, where from what I was watching, Will Barton was kind of blocking that for me. And so that's what drove me nuts. But when he gets back, and I think we've seen with him gone, it's not the late game stuff that the Nuggets are missing him. It's the first quarter. And for whatever reason, this Nuggets team, they need more offensively in the first quarter, because you look at their splits, when it comes down to the fourth, they're on fire. Like, they offensively, it works. But for whatever reason, in the first quarter, it's just they start off so sluggish, and Will Barton was that guy that always got them going. And they need a little bit more of that. So where they're missing them is the first quarter, because if they, I think they showed on altitude. I think they're split. I don't know if it was a whole season or a certain amount of time, or maybe it was with Will Barton gone or something like that. But their first quarter split is minus 6.5. On average, they are losing first quarters by 6.5 points. But then every other quarter they win. And so when he gets back, he's going to help that situation. Now, getting back to Isaiah Thomas, Isaiah isn't here. My initial thought is he was here, at least on the court wise, he was going to be that guy off the bench, being their sixth man, replacing Will Barton in that sense. But it's not just that. Go back and look at that Boston game when Jamal started off hot. And he had, I believe, 14 in the first quarter. Who was in Jamal's ear that whole time? Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah isn't just here to score and do what he does on the court. Isaiah Thomas signing with Denver is the best thing to ever happen to Jamal Murray. He's going to rub off of Jamal so much, and that's why Jamal took that last shot, by the way. I blame that shot as much on the crowd and getting Jamal to do it and Jamal himself, but I also blame that on Isaiah Thomas, because he's just, because Jamal is more talented than Isaiah Thomas. He is. But if you get that mindset into Jamal, you get that confidence into Jamal that Isaiah has, Jamal's going to be a special player. Isaiah knows that. And like I said, the best thing that happened to Jamal is that he gets 1 year with Isaiah Thomas to see how he works, to see how he plays, to understand his mindset. That's the best thing to happen to Jamal. And we're going to see that in the future. And we're going to look back at this season, especially when Isaiah gets back to playing. I think in a couple of years, we'll look back to this season and say, you know what? Isaiah helped Jamal and got Jamal to that point where Jamal wants to be, where we want Jamal to be. He's going to be the reason, not just on the court. And that's all going to change in December, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and this team should rightfully so get a huge boost with those guys coming back. I mean, one would assume, and one can only hope. Will Barton, I think you mentioned that they miss him really in the first quarter. I think they just miss him in those situations where they really need someone to break you down and get to the basket or just get some sort of shot. Not that Jamal can't do it, not that Gary can't do it.
They're just not consistent enough.
Well, but Will Barton is that he's that ISO playground ball type of guy where he can go get a shot. Now, the shots won't always be pretty, and he's going to drive you crazy because he's of that J.R. Smith, Swaggy P type mold to where, you know what? I'm hot. I'm shooting this thing, baby. And it's not always hot. And it's like, what are you doing? But then he also makes those plays where you're like, wow, okay. He's the no. Yes, okay. That's fine.
Right.
He's that guy where you're screaming, don't do it. Damn it, don't shoot that. Okay, you made that three. That's, God, all right, that's fine. You mentioned a guy, Monte Morris. Can we just give this man some love for a second? This guy is so just steady. I mean, when he is out there, he is so under control. He's not the biggest guy. He's probably maybe 6 foot. That might be generous. He's probably more like 5'10".
He's going to be a starter in this league. He's that good.
I don't know if he's ever going to be like this great player, but
no. But he's a starter.
He could easily be like second team on our all productive teams right now, if not being a starter on that team, because he's just so steady. He's so calm under pressure. He makes big shots. Obviously, his size is going to hinder him, and it's going to cause issues for him defensively and even offensively at times if bigger guys with length can keep up with his speed. But he's just under control. And without this guy, I mean, the Nuggets might lose a few games without this guy because he is so under control. He's such a great player. I'm so happy that they got him. And now people are wondering, well, who's Monte Morris? Why did they give him a contract extension before the season started? Now you know why. This guy is the backup point guard they've needed for so long, and I'm glad they finally found him in Monte Morris. It's great to see. We got a lot of Nugget talk in there. So being that it's Sunday, we got to somehow get to the Broncos. It's a bye week, so they can't lose this week. I'm sorry to hurt everybody's feelings. You can't lose this week. But knowing the Broncos, they probably could come out of this 0-1 this week. So who knows? Don't hold your breath. There's so much to go with this team right now, and standing at 3-6. Obviously, the season, in my opinion, it was done 2 weeks ago. It just, when you lost that second Chiefs game, and really after you lost probably that first Chiefs game, and then you went on that downward spiral, it's just, the season was lost, in my opinion. A lot of people are still holding out hope. A lot of people don't want to buy into the fact that this is a bad football team, and they get mad. Some do that you call them a bad football team. Well, you are what your record says you are. Now, I'm not saying that the Broncos are bad because they don't have talent. That should not be the reasoning, because the Broncos don't lack. Well, they do to a certain extent lack talent, but they have talent. They're probably the most talented, worst team in the NFL right now, if that makes any sense. From Case Keenum, who should be a steady starter, not a Pro Bowler by any means, but a guy who can keep you on track, who's not going to lose you games, may not win you games, but sure as hell won't lose you games. He's been doing that a lot lately this season. You look at the wide receiving core. Obviously, with the loss of Demaryius Thomas, you still have guys like Cortland Sutton, Emmanuel Sanders. The tight end play, Jeff Hireman, wow, coming out of nowhere. Without Jake Butt, had a good game last week. Matt Lacoste, he's made some big plays here and there. Obviously, we know what we have with a dynamic duo in Lindsey and Royce Freeman when he's healthy. And Andy Janovich is probably arguably the best fullback in the league, which is kind of weird to talk about fullbacks, but there you go. Defense is fine. Obviously, it's hit and miss at times. They come out and they start solid for this team. It's the same story every week. The defense gets a few stops. The offense sucks to begin the game. Then they go down. Then the offense makes a run, but the defense is already too tired, or they're just not good enough to hold for that long. But with this team right now, we talked about it last podcast, the tanking thing. Is tanking the right thing for this team to do? And I know we both agreed that the Broncos should put it in the tank for this season, but can tanking be a trap in so to speak, that if you start to get used to losing, you create a losing culture that bleeds into these rookies, and then it just becomes a mindset to where it's just contagious. Losing culture is contagious. Is that something you're concerned about if the Broncos, and obviously they're not going to admit that they're going to tank, but if they do prepare for the draft a little bit earlier than they should and mail it in a little bit, is that something you're worried about that the Broncos could get stuck in?
No, and I'll say the reason why I don't think so is the way they're losing. The way they're losing, because they're in every game. Now, if it was like last year, they're getting blown out every game, I would say, yeah, I'm a little bit concerned. But you know what? That game against Houston was literally the most perfect game you could possibly have for this season for the Broncos, because you play well enough to win. You see that there's talent. You see that there's some good things. There's obviously some bad things that you know that those are the holes, and those are the things that you need. And the main thing is a quarterback, and being able to draft a quarterback, you need to lose. Well, play well enough to win, lose at the last second. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Like, when, in our last podcast, we said that this was, I said it was a must lose. It was as good of a loss as you could possibly have, and as the best possible situation for the Broncos was to play well enough to win, to show that there's some promise, but lose. And the reason why I say it was also a good thing is because it saved Vance Joseph's job. And I said this last week, and I'm going to keep on saying it. You need to keep him for next year. You absolutely need to do not fire Vance Joseph. And it's because you need this team to lose. And he is so good at losing. He is.
Now you're just being mean.
He is so good that you need to keep on. That you need to keep him, because he's gonna give you those losses. And if you fire him, I feel like it's gonna light a fire underneath the team, and they're probably gonna win some games that they shouldn't, and it's gonna hurt them. If I'm John Elway, I realize, look, they're playing well enough to win, but there's bad coaching and there's bad quarterback play. Well, how do you fix the quarterback play? You draft a quarterback and a top quarterback, right? Now, the coaching situation, you can fix the coaching situation by firing Vance Joseph, but now there's no point. And in the offseason, if you do fire Vance, who the hell is going to want to come here? Unless you get a top pick and you get Herbert, but see, even this quarterback draft class isn't great. Who's going to want to come here to Denver and coach a team who has talent but doesn't have the most important position on your team? So that's the issue. So you keep Vance for this year and next year. You lose enough to where the next year's draft class, the 2020 draft class for quarterbacks, is the class that you want. Then you take a quarterback, then you fire Vance Joseph, because then at that point, a coach would want to come in to coach a great rookie quarterback, or even a first-year quarterback, or a second-year quarterback who has developed a little bit. So that's my point. It's not keeping Vance because I want to be mean and whatever. But it's because you're not going to get the coach you want, because no coach wants to come and coach a team who doesn't have a quarterback. It's just any team. Like, I don't know who said it, but there's a head coach out there, and I can't remember who it was, but said the best job right now in NFL is the Cleveland job, because they have a quarterback, they have a running back, they have a solid defense, they have the talent, but they finally have a quarterback, and that's the hottest job. And you look at even the LA Rams. I'm not sure when they signed or when they hired Sean McVay, but
2 seasons ago, I believe.
2 seasons ago?
Yeah.
Well, guess who they had just gotten? Jared Goff, right?
Yeah.
So in order to get those hot head coaches, you need a quarterback, especially when the next head coach that they're probably going to go ahead and hire is most likely going to be an offensive-minded coach. Well, no offensive-minded coach who's a hot offensive coordinator is going to want to coach Case Keenum. Sorry, but who wants to do that? Who wants a quarterback? And when you're a hot offensive coordinator, who wants Case Keenum as a quarterback? No one. So that's why I'm saying keep Vance Joseph, because you need a quarterback. Now, if you lose enough this season to where you really like, well, you're not going to get Herbert, but you really like Drew Lock, then, and you really want him, you think that he's your guy, and you draft him, then sure, go. And your plan is to draft him, sure, go fire Vance Joseph and use that, to promise the next head coach, like, hey, we're going to get this guy, and whatever. But in my opinion, you keep Vance for the rest of this year and next year. You get a good enough draft pick to get a top quarterback. You use that as, bait, I guess, to get the top head coach in 2020.
Well, it's funny that we somehow got our way to head coaches, because I just saw on Twitter that the rumors are swirling. The Ravens, who I didn't buy into at all this season, and even when they were having a winning record, I just didn't buy into them as being this good team that people should really watch. John Harbaugh, he's rumored to be on the hot seat, maybe a potential fire coming his way from Baltimore, leaving him out there to the open market. And you see people on Twitter, and our guy Cameron Parker, and I was just talking to him about it. Hire. I said hire him and go get John Harbaugh should they fire Vance Joseph. But if you look at Harbaugh, and for all those people who are on that train too, I just want to caution you, pump your brakes a little bit, okay? Because John Harbaugh, out of the last 6 seasons, 5 times he didn't make the playoffs. In that same span, to this point in the NFL season, his record is 44-46 or 45 as a head coach. So he also has a losing record, 1 game under 500. And now you can also point to, does he have a great quarterback? No. Does he have the utmost talent? Well, no. But at the same time, let's kind of pump the brakes as this guy being some sort of innovative, great head coach who's hitting the market, because he's also kind of tailed off as well. So I think we should caution that a little bit as to whether John Harbaugh can come in and save the Broncos. I think it's a much bigger thing than the head coach that's going wrong here. And I think that's bearing out right now as we see this team.
Right. And if you're Harbaugh, do you want to coach Case Keenum?
Right. Oh, Joe Flacco to Case Keenum. That's
yeah.
Woo.
Great. Like I said, though, I think what head coaches are realizing, especially head coaches like Harbaugh, who's been a head coach and who's known as a good head coach, known as a whatever you want to say about Harbaugh.
So people want to throw this credit on him, which I think if we're going to hold quarterbacks to that standard of, okay, yeah, they won a Super Bowl, but are they elite? No. Like Joe Flacco, if we're going to hold him to that, why can't we hold, John Harbaugh to that standard? Coaches who have won Pete Carroll, he's won a Super Bowl, went to 2, but what has he done since? If we're going to if this is a what have you done for me lately business, then we should be holding not only players but coaches accountable to that. And John Harbaugh just hasn't cut it.
Right. And but for those coaches, I think what they're realizing is they're not going to, because they know teams are going to want to hire them because of what they're known for. But they also know that going to a team who doesn't have a quarterback is pretty much a death sentence. Like it's, you're hurting yourself. And there's so many teams in this league and it's not just that they have a good quarterback, it's a good young quarterback. That's what these coaches want. That's why the Cleveland job is so enticing. That's why, if Arizona decides to fire, I forget his name over in Arizona, but that's what
Steve
makes
Wilkes.
those jobs so enticing. It's because they have good young quarterbacks. That's why the Rams job was so good to get. That's why the Philly job was so good to get, because they have good young quarterbacks. And yes, they struggled their rookie year, but that's because they're rookies. That's what they do. That's what rookies do. Just like what I was talking with Jamal. That's what 21-year-olds do. They're not very good. They're not very consistent. And so that's what you want. That's what these head coaches are looking at. And you look at even John Gruden, he didn't just take the Raiders job because it was the Raiders and all that money, but also there's Carr over there. And he's a good quarterback. He's a good young quarterback. If they didn't have Carr over there, would he have taken that job? Maybe because of the money, but I think it was more of he was waiting for them to have a good young quarterback, right? So that's what these coaches are looking for. You can go out and get a young coach who's never been a head coach before, because obviously it's an opportunity for them and they're not going to pass up, even if it's a team with a bad quarterback, they're not going to pass that up like Vance Joseph, because it's a head coaching job. But for these coaches that have been head coaches already, they're not going to take that job. So if you're Denver, how much do you really want to go to another new time or first time head coach? And if you do, then that's fine. And you want to go get an offensive guy who's kind of that new age offense, then you can go for that guy. But you got to start all over again and you still don't have a good quarterback. So that's the problem. And then if you want a veteran coach like Harbaugh, well, he's not going to come here because they don't have a quarterback. So they're in a bad spot. The Broncos are in a terrible spot. You got to draft a quarterback. You got to draft a top quarterback. In order to do that, you got to lose. In order to lose, you've got to keep Vance Joseph around at this point.
It's like a diagram. Brandon's diagram of Broncos way to get back to the top. Keep Vance, lose, suck a lot to get a great draft pick, get quarterback, win. That's
right.
Like your diagram.
But look at the Philly route. What did Philly do?
Trust the process. That's what they did.
Yeah, well, the Eagles and the Sixers.
Well, yeah.
Both of them. So, and before the draft, the 2018 draft, I compared the Broncos situation to the Philadelphia Eagles situation from 3 years ago or 2 years ago, right before they drafted Carson Wentz. Both teams had a good defense. Both teams had good players. They just didn't have a quarterback, and there was still a couple of other holes that they needed to fill. What did they do? They went ahead and drafted Carson Wentz. His rookie year, he didn't start the first couple of games, I don't believe. But he struggled because, there's other holes around that team. But what did they do? The next year, you have a coach that is buying into this new offensive system that, guys like Jared Goff and Carson Wentz are thriving in. And you go out and get a head coach like that, and you're also filling in the gaps because now you have your young quarterback. So now you can go spend money on your offensive line, on your defense, because that quarterback is pretty cheap. So you can spend money in other places and fill in the roster. And what happened? They won a Super Bowl, and that's how they won it. And yeah, Nick Foles took over and whatever, but they had a great team. And so that's kind of the route that I wanted them to go. I wanted them to go ahead and get, a guy like Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen or Baker Mayfield, where this first year, yeah, they're going to struggle, but how much you want to bet next year? Cleveland's going to be damn good. The Jets might be pretty good because these quarterbacks, that jump from their rookie year to their second year is huge. It's a huge jump for quarterbacks, and that's what you're waiting for. If they don't, then it's probably not going to pan out, just like Paxton Lynch. But if they do, then you're in business. So that's what I'm saying is it's so important now. And there's so many, the amount of talent is actually getting better. And it's working more with these young quarterbacks because the systems, they're building their systems around the quarterbacks instead of forcing these rookie quarterbacks to fit in their systems. And that's the difference. But that's also why I'm kind of worried about the Broncos, because I don't see John Elway going to this new system like the Rams are. Like, because if they would have went to that system like the Rams did with Jared Goff, I think Paxton Lynch would have been better. I don't know if he would have worked out because of the other issues around Paxton Lynch, but it would have worked better because they're not throwing Paxton into their system. They needed to build their system around Paxton Lynch, and that's the problem. That's why I'm kind of worried. No matter what quarterback they get in the draft, I have a bad feeling that the Broncos are going to kind of ruin him, and that's my concern.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you have to realize that this is all a crapshoot. Choosing the right coach, choosing the right player, even if you tank and you get a great pick, there's no guarantee, and I get it. The Broncos had a really good draft class this past draft, and people are like, oh, well, we suck and we get great picks. We'll get another great draft class. Okay, you do realize, though, that the Broncos coached the Senior Bowl, so they got to see a lot of these guys in action, in practice, their habits, how they look, not only in practice and their actions and habits, but their habits and actions in practice through the Broncos' way of practicing. So they basically put them through their own little practice and training camp, if you even want to go there, and how they carry themselves on the NFL level.
Right, the Broncos had an advantage.
Exactly. So to think that, we'll just go out and have another great draft class. Did the Saints have another great draft class this year? Well, that bears panning out, but I haven't heard anything about, this Saints rookie is really breaking out this year. No, it's still the guys from last year that are playing well. So you can't just rely on, we'll have another great draft class, even if we suck. Like, it's all such a crapshoot. That's why the NFL is so great, and really sports in general. But the NFL is just so much so and it really just points to how amazing, and this is really weird for me to say, but just how phenomenal this run with the Patriots really is. Mm-hmm. Just to think that they have, for the last 15 to 19, whatever it is, years, have dominated the NFL through not only picking late in drafts, not having first-round picks, not really signing their own top guys and these top free agents. It's just incredible. Now, it helps when you probably have arguably the greatest head coach of all time and arguably the greatest quarterback of all time working together. Then, of course, you're going to be relevant.
But the Colts had Tony Dungy and Peyton Manning. They only won one.
Exactly. And who are they losing to? The Patriots. So it's all such a crapshoot. I get it. I think the Broncos, if you want to call it tanking, sure, fine. I think this season should just be put in the bag. Let your young guys play, and man, it really stings right now that Chad Kelly's not on this team, because this would be the time to say, you know what, Case, we're going to see what Chad Kelly has. And depending on how Case would have taken that, whatever. You got to see if he's a future guy you can roll with. But at this point, it's a dangerous game that the Denver Broncos are playing. It can't be all Band-Aid patch fixes that we've seen over the past few years since Super Bowl 50. But you also have to be wary, too. If you become a losing team, a losing culture can be really hard to get out of. It's really sticky and muddy, a la Cleveland Browns. It's an interesting situation with the Denver Broncos, and it bears something to watch.
But what changes that situation as a quarterback? You need a quarterback to kind of change the culture of the team, and they thought that Case Keenum was going to be that guy. I don't know why. I didn't understand it before. I don't understand it now.
I don't know if they thought that he could be the guy as much as they just hoped that he could be the guy. I think they knew what he was, but
that's why they signed him to a 2-year deal.
Right. I think it was just hope. I think John Elway was like, you know what? We know history tells us you're a bridge guy and you're average. At best, you're average. But you had a really great year. And we have talent here. Hopefully, our talent can, lift you up in the way that Minnesota's talent did last year, and it's not working out. So,
Yeah, well, the worst part about that, though, is going into it thinking he's a bridge guy, is that you didn't draft a quarterback. You didn't draft someone to get across the bridge from.
And like, you mentioned it earlier, this QB draft class, and a lot of draft experts are saying it's not great. Talk about the worst possible year if you're the Denver Broncos to be bad and need a quarterback.
That's why they need to lose next year. That's why they need Vance Joseph back.
It comes full circle, Vance Joseph. That's why we need you to stay one more year. That'll do it for us today on this podcast. A lot of great stuff, a lot of great content. Shout out to all 61. Okay, let me do the math. So Brandon watched it twice. I watched it once. No parents watched it that I'm aware of. No friends. So the 58 of you that took the time out to click even for 1 second. Wow. Thank you for stumbling upon us. I can actually pull up
the watch minutes here. Let's see.
Yeah, please. I was trying to see how we could do that to see, if people actually stuck with us through the maybe hold that off until after the podcast. I don't want to crush our dreams completely during this podcast. But thank you for all those who clicked.
Not bad.
Even if you just listened for a minute, that's fine. Thank you for giving us some love there. We're just trying to be a couple guys that can vent a little bit because we have to hear the hosts at our station talk so much. We have some opinions too, so we like to get them off of our chest as well. So join us next week, probably Sunday. I don't know. The Broncos do play then, so maybe we can do next Sunday. And we'll talk about this again. We'll recap another week of Nuggets basketball, get to some national news, whether that be NFL, NBA, and all that and much more on the Behind the Glass podcast. For Brandon Stowell, I'm Stephen Priest. We'll see you next time.